Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. In this video, we're going to be doing an overview of our first content module, the module regarding basic statistics. So again, these overview videos are a little bit more casual. Really, kind of the first time I had this course made, I didn't have these videos in there, and I really wanted an opportunity to be able to talk to you about what my goal is for the particular sections in the class in the same way that I would if we were sitting down together in an in-person class where we'd get the opportunity to talk about it. So that's all this is just that in-person opportunity a little bit more than maybe we would otherwise have. So I'm glad to see you, glad you made it back, glad you survived the first week. And now we're going to get started with the content. So in this module, this is probably going to be the most mathematicsy module. Now, none of the math, we're not doing any calculus or derivatives here. We're going to be doing some addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and I think one place we square stuff, raise it to the second power. That's it. So that's the math that we do here. I will introduce a couple of formulas. They're hopefully going to be pretty mild. And I hope that you work through this. I don't expect you to have seen any of this before, but I do hope that some of it is familiar to each of you, and that all of it is pretty easy. And when I say easy, I don't necessarily mean that typing it into a calculator is quick. When I say easy, I mean that you understand the steps that you need to do in the different situations. So again, as we've talked about in the introductory module, the purpose of this one is to get you set up with the skills needed to succeed in the rest of the class. When we talk about the interpretation of, say, a variance or a standard deviation, and we eventually in this class tie that back to, or tie other things back to this interpretation and what that quantity is, unless we know what this is, unless I can discuss, hey, because this is squared, remember this is a certain characteristic of that. If we don't know these foundational components of how these things are calculated, then the later on interpretational components aren't going to have any meaning. Or you're just going to have to trust me. And believe it or not, I would like to construct this class to give you the knowledge to know what we're talking about in class, so that you don't have to just take my word for it, so that I'm just opening the door for you to understand why it's happening, and which ultimately means the interpretation is something that naturally comes from the content itself. It's not something that I tell you this is what that means. So that's my goal with this. That's my goal with the start of this. The quantities talked about in this are pretty bare bones. I cut them pretty heavily back from what I normally do in my stats courses to be really just exactly what I thought you would need to know for the rest of this class. The other thing you'll note in this module that's maybe a little bit different than some other modules, depending on who you have taken statistics with before, is the use of Excel. So again, my goal is not for you to calculate all this by hand. I do encourage you to, when you're watching through the lecture videos, try a couple of those calculations by hand. I think everything in the lecture videos is very doable to calculate by hand. I try to keep the data sets very small. But we can open that up a little bit in the Excel videos, where we go and discuss how do we do this information in Excel. So how do I calculate this in Excel? Again, the goal is in this module to teach you the calculations so that later we can come back and tie the fundamentals of these calculations, these basic statistics, into the interpretations that we're going to do later. So it's a bit dry, it's a bit more mathy than maybe some of the rest of the content is. I don't want to say it's harder than the rest of the stuff, because my hope is that it's pretty easy, it's just a little bit boring. In the next week, I think we're going to hit the hard stuff where we start talking about the theory a little bit more. It's going to be less math, but I think it's going to be a little more intellectually challenging. And again, that's really what's going to open up the floodgates to how we can access the interpretations of these statistics. So in this module, look for the basic calculations, get the basics down, and really take the time to get them and understand how they are working together. Maybe not the interpretations in this one, but how are the numbers working? What are the formulas? What do they mean? Again, try a couple by hand and then lean on those Excel videos to be able to use the Excel. You can use Excel for every quiz, every homework, every article review assignment, everything you're going to be able to use Excel for. So you don't have to do anything by hand unless it's specified otherwise. But practice it a couple times by hand so that when you're doing the Excel, it'll make building those Excel formulas that much easier. In the Excel videos too, look for me to drop some hints, tips, and tricks. I may or may not accentuate this in the Excel videos explicitly, but even if I don't, listen when I say things like, hey, I hit Control and down, and that automatically took me to the bottom of the table. There's a few things that I've gotten through working with data for the last decade plus that really can be helpful when you're dealing with data sets yourself. In fact, there's sometimes that I work with clients where, frankly, that's what they focus on the most, is not the actual numerical stuff that we do, but the way that I navigate around Excel spreadsheets or put some together. If you've been using Excel for a while, I don't expect you to pick up anything new. But if Excel is a tool that's kind of scared you and you've been a bit standoffish with it, I encourage you to take advantage of my experience and get the hang of putting a couple of those things together. It's going to make navigating and dealing with data a heck of a lot simpler. In any case, I hope you enjoy this module in your journals. Again, let me know how the content goes. And let me know how the course is going thus far, and I look forward to getting in touch with you regarding the content and seeing you next week.